Aftershocks Tremors. We are back, Matt and Chris, with you for another discussion episode on all things music business. What's going on, Chris? I know you got a lot going on with Chris Aiken Presents, man. Tell us what you've had. You've had a hell of a week.
It's been busy, that is for sure. As of midnight tonight, today's Thursday, my interview with John Campbell from Lamb of God will be launching, and then next week, Skid Row and Orianthi and Dead Daisies, and the next week, Diamond Head, and coming soon, Vinny Appice and Blackie Lawless and Leather Wolf and Maurizio from Cataclysm and Autograph, and I just have a ton of them coming up, man. They just keep on coming.
Yeah, a little bit of everything in there. You know, like you said, you got some death metal with Maurizio. You've got, of course, you got Blackie Lawless from Wasp, the 80s stuff. I mean, you got a good mix of everything there, which is really cool too, you know?
Yeah, and there's some unknown stuff in there too. Serena Talley, who was formerly of Burning Witches, and a really cool thrash band. I don't know if I shared it with you yet, but if I haven't, I need to. This band called Rhythm of Fear. Have you heard of these guys yet?
Yeah, I've seen them live, man.
Are they good live? Because
they're fantastic. So they used to. That's funny because I'm trying to talk to them myself. They used to be the backing band for Leeway when the singer Eddie Sutton toured some years. It's probably about 3 or 4 years now. They came out here, and Rhythm of Fear was the opening band, and that band was the backing band for him. They played all the Leeway songs. So yes, great band out of Florida. Love them. Absolutely.
Well, I'll have to hook you up with them because I wasn't aware of them, and I listened to the record. I was like, holy fuck, this is like my speed.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then who's the other? You know that band Them? Are you aware of?
I know of them. I don't know them that well though.
Yeah, I think they started as a King Diamond tribute band because they do the whole like King Diamond symbolism, and there's a little bit of the in the mix. But I think they've kind of gone away from that now. The new record doesn't sound like King Diamond, but they're on their 4th consecutive concept album.
Ooh,
and I'm for me, my main question I want to ask them is, are people getting these concepts? You're not really known, and you're doing concept albums like one after the next. That's a tough road, man.
That is, but I guess they're just a concept band, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's all I know is they sound pretty cool, and they've got a cool look. They do the whole dress up and look thing. So if anything, it'll be a funny interview to see on the camera.
Oh yeah, very nice, man. Yeah. I've had some interviews too. Freedom Hawk, Stoner Band, Virginia Beach, great new album they have. The Clay People. I don't know if you remember those guys.
Yeah, they're industrial. They were out in the 9 Inch Nails era, right? Somewhere in there.
Yep, late 90s. They're from I think upstate New York. Yeah, they were on the Strangeland soundtrack.
Right.
Yeah, the song Awake was all over the place. But in this new record, Cult Hypnotica really got, one thing I've been getting into. There has, like about a year, it was about 2 years ago when we first started doing Aftershocks, we talked to Amir Darak from Orgy.
Yeah.
And Julian K. And I remember we were talking to him. We asked him, what was he seeing the industrial metal scene? Was there a resurgence with it? He said that there was. And I remember he dropped a bunch of names of some bands.
Right.
I don't remember. I don't think I checked any of them out. But Sid Kieran, I talked to him too a few weeks ago from Ex-Ministry Guitars. He was saying the same thing, that there is a resurgence. So I've been listening to some of that industrial metal again recently because I've been interviewing some of those bands, obviously.
Sure.
And I'm starting to be like, man, I kind of missed that stuff. I actually forgot how good a lot of those bands were.
I love that stuff, man. There was in that era, in the 9 Inch Nails era, I was that kid that if it was any kind of industrial, I had to have it,
Okay.
And I have a lot of weird stuff in my collection now that I'm just like, nobody knows who these bands are, but I remember them, like 13MG and I don't know, Screw with a K.
Yes, I remember Screw.
Remember Screw, and I have just this handful of these bands. Some of them people remember. Prick, Gravity Kills.
Kills,
I mean,
Stabbing Westward, all those bands.
Yeah, Stabbing Westward was not, and they're back too. They're put out a really good record, good EP, maybe 6 months ago.
Oh wow, okay.
So yeah, they're definitely back and active and doing their thing as well. So yeah, that scene is definitely back and around. So
Yeah, I just forgot how many. I knew there was a bunch of bands, but I kind of forgot a lot of them until they've been popping up again lately. Like I said, the Clay People is just one of them. And when I'm listening to them, I'm just thinking to myself, man, that music has aged well. You know, a lot of the
mhm,
stuff it doesn't sound outdated. It almost has like a more of a heavy rock feel to it, more so than I thought it did, more than really metal a lot of times.
sure,
And so I just been really kind of like really feeling it lately when I've been hearing those songs. So I've been kind
sure,
of going back, like you said, the bands like Screw and all those bands. Just been checking them out because, like I said, I haven't heard it in a while, and it's just kind of good to hear that music that's back and those bands are still going. It's pretty cool.
sure. Just don't
Yeah,
tell Eddie Trunk or Sebastian Bach that you like that stuff, because God forbid a band should use
laptops.
technology.
Oh, that's a whole nother you know, I know you and Toomey hit that topic up on your show, so we won't go to that
Yeah.
today. But yes, I totally know what you mean. But anyway, man. So yeah, I just wanted to, tonight. One thing when I was interviewing that band Freedom Hawk, we're
Mhm.
talking about the stoner scene when they came up in the early to mid 2000s, and I was just kind of having them take me through sort of a lot of the changes they've seen. And one of the things they talked about, there was this website called stonerrock.com. And that's really where that whole scene sort of congregated to at that time
Okay.
because it was such a small scene. There was only a few labels, maybe Meteor City and Small Stone. There was probably just three or four labels
Sure.
globally that were putting that music out. So stonerrock.com was just sort of it was I think it was more of a blog type of thing with news and everything and releases, and then they eventually morphed into a full-time record store called All That Is Heavy, which is no longer
Okay.
around, well, once the guy sold it, but that was a huge hub that sort of kept, I guess, the whole scene going until later in the late 2000s, early, around 2010 or so, when really the stoner scene kind of really started burgeoning and there was more labels globally that were opening up and signing these bands like Heavy Psych Sounds and all these ones, a lot of them in Europe. And so we were just talking about scenes, and I
Right.
was saying and talking about what scene they were from in Virginia Beach, and it just got me to thinking between talking about how that stonerrock.com was the epicenter, sort of like that was pretty much the scene itself. There was no local scenes, and
Sure.
then I started thinking about local scenes, and we've touched on this on some of the other shows. Obviously local scenes just aren't what they used to be. I mean, obviously most things in music business are not what they used to be,
Mhm.
but it
True.
got me thinking about scenes and how is it better to have a global scene than it is to have a local scene that can build up a band? Is it better to have it how it is now, or was it better back then when you had just the local scenes with 4 or 5 bands would tour and just kind of play shows together all the time? And so I just thought that would be kind of a good topic to kind of get
Sure.
into because it is, it's something that obviously, I've read some articles. There's a lot of people that have been actually writing about this stuff for some years now. And so, yeah, it's just something I thought it was kind of a good idea to talk about tonight.
Sure.
So, I was thinking about starting it off by just giving it a little bit of a background
Okay.
of scenes in general.
Sure.
And so I mean, I literally mean to stop me or cut me off if I'm going too far here, or if you actually just want to interject and
Sure.
if I miss something. But just when we think about rock scenes locally, I mean, the first thing I could think of, and this was obviously by watching, some documentaries over the years. Even Bob, our good buddy Bob Nalbandian, mentioned some of this as well in the LA Metal series,
Mhm.
and it talks about really in the '60s in London there was that whole blues rock scene,
Sure.
right? That morphed into, of course, local scenes going throughout the major cities between the '70s, '80s, up until really the '90s, where I think local, more mid-major scenes became the industry changed a little bit, and that's where a lot of the new music was coming out of. Obviously, with Seattle with Sub Pop, right?
Sure. Mhm.
That was the big one. Then a lot of the obviously the labels, the major labels saw this as well. This is easy win for us. We could just watch these labels locally in these cities sign all these bands, and we could kind of just keep tabs and if we see something burgeoning, we can go and just scoop up some bands. I think one of the examples I always use I think I've talked to you about before, was there was sort of this scene that was in Lawrence, Kansas, of all places. And so there was 3 bands that got signed, 3 alternative rock or alternative metal bands that got signed out of there to major labels. There was this band called Stick that was like an Alice in Chains type of band.
Sure.
There was a band Paw. You remember the band Paw?
Oh,
I'm sure
yeah.
you remember that band. Yeah. And there was this band Kill Creek that was more of an alternative rock thing. They weren't really metal. Paw, I remember reading how industry insiders thought they were going to be the next Nirvana. That just shows you how out of touch I think a lot of those people were back then. But anyway, fast forward, a lot of cities tried to replicate what Seattle did. You had in New England, you had Wonder Drug Records. You had out here in San Francisco area, you had Alternative Tentacles. I know you were telling me there was also a label in Cleveland, I believe, too. That was a small label that was signing bands, right?
Yeah, there was a few actually here in Cleveland, and honestly, I actually look at that as a detriment more than a more than a
Okay, yeah.
an advantage, because what ended up happening here was that people were forming labels only to move bands up.
Okay.
You know, and the one that formed here, I think it was called Rust Belt Records. They were a bigger one, and there was a band, I don't know if you remember this band or not. They were national for about 33 seconds, called Cinematic.
I
And
don't.
the singer was this guy named Ken Cooper, and a very talented singer. But he saw pretty much right away that his band wasn't going to get huge. So he formed a label instead and started signing local bands with the sole purpose of shopping them.
Okay.
Like
Wow.
he decided he was going to be the scene that was,
Okay.
that was picked up from. So we had that, and we had several versions of that. Tom Hazart, he's still in the scene or in the industry, but Tom had, he hung out around here because he found Chimera and pushed them over. So then he had his label, and he signed a zillion bands, to his label, trying to move them along. So you had that. You had the Standby Records that found Black Veil Brides.
Okay, yeah.
That was owned by a guy named Neil Sheehan. And it was the same thing. He was here locally, and he put his label together. And once he sold Black Veil Brides up to Atlantic, I think Atlantic's who bought that, or Lava, or one of them.
I think it was Atlantic. Lava, yeah, Lava.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah. Once he did that, then it was off to the races with signing a zillion other bands and trying to sell them to, whatever label he could push them through. So that was what ended up happening here once Seattle hit, and people saw that exactly what you said, that people were just picking off little labels and buying up their bands. That became a thing here. That was a big thing here. Mushroomhead famously, and famously because I caused them a hassle, but they were signed to a little tiny label that's still in business called Eclipse Records. Yeah. And Eclipse put out their XX record, and then they backdoor dealed around the Eclipse guy and signed with Universal. Universal wanted them. So they signed with Universal under the guise of, well, Universal has better lawyers. Fuck you, sue me, and that's what they did. They went and just fucked that guy over and went to Universal. But it was the same thing. It was, they took Universal, let a little band literally let the little band record the whole album, put it out, and then just brought in a producer to remix it, and that was it.
Yeah.
So that's what happened here. Cleveland was absolutely a scumbag central when it came to seeing the industry and fucking it up.
Well, I see. I'm going to disagree. I don't think that's scumbagish. I think, look, I'm not going to lie. Even when I started my little label, that's what I viewed my label as, is a stepping stone label. I was just hoping to hit now one band so that it could basically fund and grow the label. And I think that's, I wanted to continue the label. I didn't just want to hit a band, get money, and see and close up shop. No, I just want to be able to do that full time if I could and sign more bands. Only way you're going to do that though with a small label like that really is if one or two of these bands kind of hit, either real big locally or regionally at least.
Mhm.
So I think most labels start because that's sort of what they have in mind. They want to help get a band off the ground, and then eventually they get noticed, or they get picked up or whatever by someone who could do more with them and obviously make them bigger, and therefore you still own the rights to that record you put out. That's where you make your money once that band starts getting bigger and bigger.
Mhm. Yeah, true. And on that level, I don't disagree with you. There was a lot of little labels at that time that were doing just that, like Gotham Records. Remember Gotham Records?
Yes,
They
yeah.
they put out quite a few small bands that really didn't go anywhere,
Mhm.
but they seemed like they had the right intention in mind. They seemed like they were signing bands that were quality. They were putting them on the road for a little while, and then they were trying to ship them up
Mhm.
to the next thing. The problem that I saw was that so many of these guys were cutthroat dickheads, and they were raping the bands. The band would
Mhm.
come in, they'd sign a deal with them, and they say, "Okay, well, you need $3,000 worth of clothes, and you need $5,000 worth of stage gear, and you
Mhm.
need to pay me my consulting fee of, you know, 25% plus 5 grand," or,
Yeah. Mhm.
what, and I saw that so much, and
Sure.
there is horror story after horror story with all my band friends of how they got totally fucked by these guys. And I mean, it was a thing here. Here it was like, eh, I think because Chimera and Mushroomhead both escaped out of here at the same time,
Mhm.
pretty close to the same time.
Mhm.
I think all of a sudden everybody thought that they were the next one of
Mhm.
those.
Got it.
And it led to the vultures. The vultures saw the dummies that were gonna just throw money, around, and they
Mhm.
took advantage. Dude, let me tell you, I have just sitting right over there, I have an arsenal of, laminates because I used to, when I was doing the metal show on MMS, I was always asked to host things,
Mhm.
and I must have 20 laminates over there of quote unquote benefit shows that I that I was
Really?
the host of for this is raising money so that local bands can get in this movie,
Yeah,
or
I know.
this is for extra money for tour support because we're gonna send local band Y to on a
Mhm.
10 city tour
Sure.
or whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the scumbags came out because I think there was a purity at the beginning, and even more than at the beginning. I think through Seattle, I think there was a purity,
Mhm.
but Seattle blew up so big, and that's right when the industry was at the height of its money making.
Yep.
And I think people just saw that and were like, "Oh, I'm going to cash in while I can."
They were doing all those P&D deals back then too, and
Mhm.
that was a
Yeah.
thing, which was perfect for both independent labels and major labels. It was a great,
Mhm.
I thought, partnership, and way it should have been. It's yeah. I mean, listen, that is a great idea to have these local labels be the scouts and
Mhm.
to sort of sign and be the farm team.
Sure.
It's like their farm system. And yeah, make a deal if you see they're putting out some good, some good talent. Yeah, you make a deal with them, 3 or 4 records. You sign with these small independent labels that they'll just do, the P&D deals with them. Really
Yeah.
cost both sides nothing.
Mhm.
Both had a lot to gain, but of course, yes, then greed takes over, and it wasn't enough for the majors. I don't. I think the indies were totally fine with it, and it's one of the reasons I don't. We don't see. I mean, there's a lot of reasons we don't see much indie labels anymore. That's just one of the many things on top of
Mhm.
the obviously internet and stuff and technology, but and like you said, yeah, there was so many. I mean, AMREP that came out of Minneapolis, another small, I mean, who's going to go
Sure.
into Minneapolis and sign these bands? And it wasn't just bands, obviously, they signed for Minneapolis, but they really did focus on the Midwest, and they
Mhm.
even those bands. They didn't even really tour the big cities, LA and New York. They just kept it within the Midwest. That's how
Yeah.
they got big and they got noticed. So but just thinking about again with local scenes versus now this global virtual scene, pretty much is what
Mhm.
it is.
Yeah.
I just thinking about some of the pros. I don't want to say pros and cons, but just some of the benefits. I'd say and shortcomings. Obviously one of the best things about I would say maybe not having these local scenes anymore. One thing, I mean, this is what people I think. I'm just thinking of talking about my experiences of talking to other bands
Sure.
previously. A lot of bands, for instance, if you've got a local scene and that's where you're expected to come out of, there's a lot of pressure to you also to sort of sound at least a little bit like some of these bands, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and I always talk about just just coming from New York, growing up. Every single one of those metal bands, whether it be Typo Negative or Life of Agony or Biohazard, all that, and I've said this a bunch of times, these bands all started out really playing with hardcore bands. You had to
Sure.
sort of come up with hardcore because New York was more of a punk town than a metal town. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of bands just sort of they would just incorporate a little part here and there in some of those songs to give it like a hardcore edge so that they can get on those bills because that's where a lot of the bigger bands were playing, or just where they can actually get on shows to get discovered, if you want to say, quote
Sure.
unquote. So I think one of the things that's good about having a global scene over that is in terms of music, you could just play whatever it is you want to play. And you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about it because you're going to find someone somewhere, some band somewhere that's similar to you that you could kind of not, I don't know if you could necessarily tour with them, but you could kind of create sort of a little virtual world music scene online if you wanted to. So it's interesting going from the physical presence of a scene to now you don't even need to do that. Everything is just
Mhm.
done seen right here is like we're doing,
Sure.
you know.
I'm stretching trying to find a positive
Yeah,
because
okay.
I think that the fact that there's no local scenes has absolutely wrecked music. I really do.
Okay.
I mean, I honestly
I
don't know
agree
of
with you.
any I don't
Mhm.
know of any positive I can say
Mhm,
because
okay.
even yeah, you can have your own scene, but what it does is it has stopped any assistance of one band to the next.
Mhm, absolutely.
There's no work. The work ethic has gone to shit, to
Mhm,
total shit. I can't tell you how many bands I talk to and I see that they're upset that their show drew 33 people because well,
mhm,
but I put out a Facebook post every day.
mhm.
And it's like that's not enough.
No,
It's not enough. You gotta talk to people. You gotta interact, and that interaction is gone.
it's
You
gone.
know, back in the late 90s, early 2000s here, there were pretty much three distinct cliques.
Mhm,
There was the Mushroom Head clique, and there was like a bunch of bands that were in that clique. That was like
mhm,
13 Faces and Runt and 10,000 Cadillacs and 216. There's a bunch of those bands, and they all played together and they always ran together. And even though I personally was not a fan of them, I certainly saw every show that they did 500, 600, 800 people because
mm, wow, nice.
it was a strong clique.
Mhm,
Then there was a clique, I'll call it the Gatlin clique. Our friend John Drake was led his band Gatlin.
mhm,
And there was a selection of 5 or 6 bands that would play with them all the time and swap in and out with them.
mm,
And those shows, I mean, Gatlin famously played the Odeon here, which was like 1,000 seats, like over and over and over and over, and sold it out continuously.
mhm,
And again, it was because everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew their fan set. But then there was other, even smaller cliques. Like there was a clique of stoner bands here, and I loved them. And some of them you probably are aware. You specifically are probably aware of, like
mhm.
Red Giant
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
and Abdullah and
Mhm,
Disengage. I mean, there was this collection of these stoner bands, and again, those bands all played together consistently. And when they would play shows, when they would announce shows, they were always well attended because these guys all worked together. There was none of these guys were like competitive. I mean, they
mhm,
were competitive internally, like, yeah, we're gonna blow you off the stage type of a deal,
sure.
but they weren't competitive of, well, we're going to book the same night as you and we're going to try and steal your audience.
Got it, yeah,
they,
mhm,
they all played together. If one clique if the Gatlin clique was playing a show and they had 3 bands on the show, the other 2 or 3 bands would not play that night. They
mhm.
respected the
Yeah,
they
mhm,
respected the schedule as much as they respected the bands because they all worked together to make each other money.
mhm,
And that's gone now. Now it's, dude, it's one of the reasons so many of the clubs are
Oh,
close,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
because,
It's
who's
true.
going to come
Yeah.
out? I'm in Cleveland, you're up by the bay. Who the hell's going to come out when band from Wisconsin comes to town?
No, it's a great point, man. That is a huge thing, especially like you said right there, in terms of if you don't draw, if these bands are playing locally and they're only drawing 15, 20, 30 people, these
Yeah,
clubs aren't going to last. They're not going to make enough money to stay open. And there won't be
right.
any places for these places to play. Absolutely. Now, I will say, though, one of the things you talked about there, the clicks,
Mhm.
okay? See, that was something well, even before that, as you were saying, even before we get into that, you said about the other bands that were respecting the bands if they had shows that night and they wouldn't schedule shows,
Mhm.
which is interesting because in New York with the hardcore scene, what it was one of the I would call it the crews as they would call them there, with the Madball crew and all them.
Mhm.
This is from what I've heard, but this was after I had moved out to California, but they would go to if there was bands booking other hardcore shows and you were in the New York City area, they would go and start fights and get the show shut down
Jesus.
for these guys. So there, everyone knew don't book a show when certain bands in a certain clique were playing. Now that's one of the things I would say. I mean, is sort of a pro. Is I mean, at least from when I grew up watching a lot of bands, there was a lot of bands that were in these scenes that really sounded musically nothing like these other bands, but they were
Right.
part of the so-called scene because they were friends with them, even if their music sucked. I mean, there was some bands, I won't name them, but there's one particular band in New York Hardcore that I do not like. And it's not so much that they're a horrible band, it's more that their sound is nothing like hardcore. They're just a punk rock band, a regular,
Sure.
almost poppy punk rock band, but they get on all these bills billed as hardcore. And I mean, I'm like, they're not. And so some of
Right.
that stuff, or they'd have even back then, they'd have rap bands on, rap groups. And I'm like, well, okay, that's cool, but they're not a hardcore band. Don't call them a hardcore rap band. That makes no sense.
Sure.
So I think they would sometimes dilute what you were doing in order to get some of their buddies and people of the clique get their bands on a lot of these bills, or just sort of get whatever it was. So sometimes I just thought it was exclusive in that way too, where now you don't have to worry about that. If you're not, say, the most outgoing guy, you're not a great communicator, you're not really good at going and schmoozing with people. Well, your music can do the talking now, I think,
Mhm.
these days, where back then you had to have some sort of skills like that, unless your music was that great where people just couldn't
Right.
miss it. But you had to have those skills in order to kind of bond with people and make connections. And I think nowadays it makes it more of a, I guess, even a level playing field for a lot of those artists and bands.
Yeah, no. I mean, I certainly hear what you're saying, and on some level, I agree. But I think the other piece that really hurts that is the total lack of attention span. People are not geared
Yeah.
to spend an hour learning about a band online. I mean, dude, even in the early internet days. So I don't want to go like
Mm.
I don't want to sound like the old man in the room here and be like, yeah, back in my day, back when the
Yeah.
when the Beatles were playing, I
Mhm.
don't want to be that guy. But even in the early days of the internet, let's say Korn. I'll just
Mhm.
throwing any band out there. Before Korn was famous, when you first heard Korn for the first time,
Mhm.
more than likely, if you liked them, I don't remember if you liked them or not, but if you liked them, the
Mhm.
first move you did was went to the internet, you beep, 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 made all the noise to connect to your AOL messenger, and you looked up Korn. And you looked them up to see what they've done and where they've played and who they've played with. And you listened to samples of 15 other songs that they might have out there. Like you investigated it a little more.
Mhm.
Now, I'm doubtful now if I give you a name of a killer, like we said, Rhythm of Fear.
Mhm.
I guarantee you there's less than two people that will be listening to this podcast that will go and listen to all 45 minutes of their album. They might listen
Agreed.
to 30 seconds and they'll be like, oh,
Agreed.
that's cool, or it's not cool.
Mhm.
And then they'll be forgotten. And then a week from now, 1 week from today, if you ask somebody that listen to it, hey, what do you think of Rhythm of Fear? They'll be like, who? They won't
Mhm.
remember because
Mhm.
the time invested by not having it in front of you, by not having a physical experience,
Mhm.
drastically limits the attention span that you give. It's one of the reasons I think that
Yeah.
bands are not breaking out now, just in
Mhm.
general. That's you have you have just a handful of bands that are breaking out. And are they really breaking out? I mean, is Greta Van Fleet really broken out?
I know what you're getting at. Yeah,
Is
no, it's
Hailstorm really
mhm,
broken out? I
mhm,
mean, these are the big Hailstorm, I would argue, is probably one of the biggest new bands around right now, new rock
mhm,
bands, newer, even though they're what 10, 12 years old at this point. But
yep, mhm.
how big are they really? They're not even arena level.
Well, that and I think that goes into a different topic in terms of that's something that we've talked about too, in terms of the old music and older bands being the focus,
Hmm.
nostalgia being the focus. I mean,
Sure.
someone like Hellstrom, like you said, yeah, they're not that new. Obviously, they've been around, yeah, a good 12 years at least, I would think.
Yeah.
But they're still new in so many people's. It takes now 10 years for people to get to know
True.
you. Where back in the day, you put out one good record, by the time your second record came out, you'd be a band for 3, 4 years, people would already know you,
Hmm.
very well. You'd be a veteran band by the time you were together 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Now you're just a baby. I mean, it doesn't matter how many records you put out, it's really how long have you been on a specific level, even though it
Hmm.
took you 10 years to get to that level.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think a lot of that goes to obviously just that's the list enough, that's something too, another topic I have up the pike for us in regards to
Right.
that kind of stuff, because it's definitely something that goes hand in hand with what we're talking about today. Absolutely.
Sure.
But I just think just looking, I'm trying to just obviously think of positive ways, because the thing is too, positive things I should say, because it's here to stay, this stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
There is no the one listen, one good thing too is, for instance, like I spoke to this band, just their episode came out a week ago, called Abrams. They're a heavy rock band out of Denver.
Mhm.
Now, Denver, think of Denver, if you think of where it's located, it's really like the guy said, it's an island. I mean,
Right.
there's the closest major city or mid-major city to Denver is Salt Lake, which is 9 hours from there, and you got Albuquerque, and those aren't even major cities; they're more
Yeah.
mid-majors. I mean, for them to get to a major hub, whether it's Phoenix or Vegas or whatever it is, I mean, it's 2 states over. I mean, that's
Yeah.
those guys can't go anywhere. If I mean, it's for them to tour is insane. So they're kind of stuck there locally. And like he was telling me, I mean, they're not really a metal band at all. They're, like I said, a heavy rock band. They have some of their older stuff was more metallic. It was more of like
Mhm.
post-hardcore, sort of progressive metal in the vein of like a Mastodon type of thing. But they have to play with like death metal bands, because that's really the extreme metal is really the main sound for metal
Sure.
bands in Denver. So they're kind of like there's no one that sounds like them. So for them, it's good to be able to sort of, with the global virtual scene,
Mhm.
people will know about them, even though people aren't seeing them live, because they put out a really good record that's good quality, very well produced on a good, solid independent label. They can still get notoriety, like for myself and people, just everywhere,
Sure.
without having to go tour. I mean, back then you had to tour those towns for people to
Mhm.
know you.
Oh
You don't
yeah.
have to do that now. I mean, yes, same time, like you said, though, it's a catch-22 because there is a shortage of clubs because of that on top of
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's a tough catch-22 right now, man. It's a
it is.
really hard time for a band to break free, to break loose, to be
Mm,
new and get found, because people aren't paying attention. The media is not helping. The media doesn't help at all. It's all reduced to podcasting and stuff. And then, not to bring our woes into it, but every time we throw in 30 seconds of music, then we get fucked for doing so. Even though
mhm.
we're totally trying to help bands, and every single band we talk to is thrilled when we say we're going to play 30 seconds of their video,
Mhm.
and then we put it up on YouTube, and what do we get? We get a copyright strike or whatever.
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, so the industry as a whole is not helping. And yeah, it's a tough go. I mean, guys like me and you that love music, we love the internet for this. We have discovered
Sure.
some bands that are going to be with us forever. I know I have
Mhm, absolutely.
bands like A Thousand Mods or
Yep.
Witch Skull. These are bands, especially Witch Skull from
Oh,
Australia.
yeah. Great.
I would never know of that band
Nope.
if
Yep.
I waited for them to tour, if I
Exactly.
didn't have the internet. And because I have the internet, I not only heard a couple of albums from them, but had a chance to talk to them and relate to them, and now I'm a fan of them. So
Yeah,
I'm definitely not gonna say that it's not possible, because it is. It's just that I wish the media, it's like everything that used to be good about the scene that made the scenes. It wasn't just the physical shows, it was all of it. It was the radio stations having specialty shows for the local music, and playing the
mhm,
local music on the big station where it would get exposure it would never get any other time. And it was local magazines in town that would, do an article. They might cover the big concert that's coming. If Metallica's coming to town or something, they'll do Metallica will be on the cover, but that local band that's also playing the tiny club is also featured in there, to where, it kind of leveled the playing field back then.
sure,
All of that is gone now. Now it's all just clickbait bullshit. It's only the
yep.
biggest bands that get covered. Look, go to any one of these music sites that are, the big music sites that are out there, and
I'm
I
gonna share one right
promise
now.
you, yeah, there you go. And what is Lamb of God? It leads with the biggest band.
Well, Korn, Scotty, and John
Yeah.
Petrucci. Once again, and they, no, I'm glad you brought it up because that was something I wanted to bring up. Dave Lombardo, we got
Mhm.
Serge. I mean, Ozzy.
Yeah.
You tell me, I mean, Volbeat, they've been around a long time. At the Gates, they're from back in the 90s. Corey Taylor, Pucifer. I mean, Maynard. Yeah, I mean, this is an issue, man. This is a problem
Mhm.
when because it's true. Remember, we look at those metal magazines back in the day. Now,
Yeah.
what was some of the great? Let's get this thing off because I don't watch that movie, but um, I just wanted to show an example. But there was always a lot of times, whether it was Metal Edge or whatever, all those great magazines
Yeah.
back then, Metal Maniacs.
Sure.
Most of the time, you would see a pretty new band that was maybe on their second album or so, or sometimes even their first
Mhm.
if they were really just destroying it.
Yeah.
Or if you didn't, you'd always see those new bands on the bottom. Remember, they'd always listen to those bands on the bottom just to show you that there are features in there. Great. They would feature at least two or three newer bands in some of the subgenres.
Sure.
Yeah, now nothing. I
No.
mean, like we just saw one example. There is not one
No.
newer band within the last 10 years that was listed on there.
Yeah, the only way a newer band gets listed on one of these sites is if they piss in an audience member's mouth, or if they
Yep.
say something super political,
Yeah.
super hyper political. If they don't do either of those two things, they're not getting mentioned on any of the sites.
No. No, not at all.
If they just put out a record that kicks ass, it won't even get reviewed anymore.
Mhm.
It won't get reviewed. No one talks about it. No one quotes them like they're an equal. Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. Well, and then a lot of times we hear people say, "Well, it's because these new bands they're not doing anything new. There's nothing good out there." That's the excuse they use.
Mhm.
It's just the excuse they use. Yes, I mean, I'll admit I don't think I've heard anything that's it's just outrageously different and just this brand new sound that's like taking over. But what I am seeing is like it's always been done. Listen, to me, grunge that wasn't
Yeah.
this, wow, this new sound that no one's ever done before. No,
No.
it was taken from the 70s punk and then punk
Mhm.
and just gonna coalesce between punk and Sabbath, really. That's what
Yeah.
most of those bands were based around.
Let's be honest, one of the biggest bands in the entire world for the last 35 years has been Guns N' Roses, who did absolutely nothing original.
No, nothing.
Nothing,
Yeah,
and didn't even put out a lot of records, for God's sakes. They only put
yeah.
out what, 3 records, 3 original records and an
Mhm.
EP.
That's it, yeah.
Let's get real, folks. It doesn't have to be this new crazy sound. And we had a burst of new crazy sounds when the whole Kill Switch Engage stuff, all
Mhm.
that more modern extreme metal broke loose there in the, what is that, early 2000s,
Early
I guess.
2000s, yep, mhm.
We had the Corn was a fairly new sound. Disturbed was a derivative of that.
Mhm.
You had like Kill Switch and all those heavier bands on Unearth and Shadows Fall, and not that they were just super distinctly original, but it was a different sound than what we had been hearing. It was a
Mhm.
heavier version of Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax or whatever. It was the next level, you
Mhm.
know, and none of those bands have turned out to be massive either.
Nope. No. Listen, like you said, a great example is the Guns N' Roses because they do nothing very original. What they did was they took bits of other sounds,
Mhm.
made something. They were obviously very talented musicians, and then you had a really great frontman.
Yeah.
Now, don't tell me that there aren't great frontmen. We've interviewed some of them over the
Mhm.
last 3 years. There's some great frontmen out there. I'm not saying they're doing anything, brand new, but they're just taking what's been done and they're putting a more modern spin on it. To me, that's what
Yeah.
it's all about anyway. You
Mhm.
know?
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
people like to and maybe it's just because we're getting older and we're around older people.
sure has
That
something to
could
do
be
with it.
part of
Oh
it.
yeah,
But, I fucking hate old people. And by old people, I mean people my age and probably 10 years younger and certainly everybody over. Because
Mhm.
when it comes to music and pop culture in general, they all fucking suck. They
Yeah.
all have quit. They've all just quit growing. They're either falling their way into Jason Aldean territory,
Mhm.
or they're hanging on to that Motley Crue tour and their Def Leppard records, and they're
Mhm.
trying to pretend that they're still cool because they listen to Queensryche still or whatever. It's like, you know what? There's so much new fucking music out there. Go support some of it
Yeah.
because you're not leaving the next generation, your kids, your kids' kids, you're not leaving them anything by
It's
just limiting what is getting exposure. And it's honestly everybody that has quit growing musically is limiting the next generation from what they're going to hear.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and no, you're absolutely right. If we once again, we've been saying it, there's nothing that's going to replenish these bands when they're gone, man. I mean,
Yeah.
there are bands out there. You just got to give them a chance. You got to go check it
Mhm.
out. I mean, I don't remember. Look, we've talked about. Unfortunately, yes. Look, the days of these bigger bands taking out these small bands and them getting that notoriety from all that. Yeah, those days are done. A lot of
Mhm.
it's just because of the business and the risk involved, and these promoters, and they just don't want to take the risk. They want the sure thing. And if you want to get on a show now, big bill, you've got to pay your way on there.
Yeah.
So I get it. They're not just going to take out just some small fry because that band that's headlining really likes them and thinks they're going to be the next big thing. I get that. Okay, that's fine. But then what needs to happen is you've got to support some of these 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 shows that these bands are putting out, or you got to at
Sure.
least look for the music. Go and once a week, there's so many podcasts that have playlists or whatever is your
Yeah.
preference. When you're in your car, I mean, pop it on. I mean, I know people like to get stuff fed to them, but if you're not going to get anything fed to you via commercial radio, we all know that.
Yeah.
That's new. I guess Sirius XM is probably the closest thing to that people are engaging in and investing in terms of paying for, but people don't want to pay for music anymore, and
Yeah.
that's the thing too. So I don't know if really any too many people that even have Sirius XM anymore.
Yeah, not really. I mean, everybody's gone to Spotify or YouTube Music or
Mhm.
whatever. And the unfortunate thing with those services is that honestly, what we wanted forever is one of the biggest curses of when we got it,
Yeah.
which was we bitched forever that we wanted all our music a la carte. I just want to
Mm.
pick whatever I can listen to, whatever I want when I want to hear it. And what does it do? It's got everybody listening day in and day out to Motley Crue, Ozzy Osbourne, Metallica,
It's crazy.
Megadeth,
I know.
and if a new song slips in there, they can't fucking reach quick enough for their phone to skip it.
I know.
Oh, what is this shit? I don't know this. Ah, this is better. It's new Megadeth. It's like, ugh,
Yeah, they don't even
stop.
check. They don't even check to see, like, listen to a song and be like, "Oh, who's that? Let me go check out." I don't.
No,
I never see anyone do that. I mean, I just of
no.
my friends and people I'm around, I never see anyone do it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a quick skip,
Yeah.
and dude, think of the bands. Not skip the huge bands for a minute because they're obvious ones, but think of the big bands that if they came up today, just would have no audience, would never like a Dream Theater. And I
Mhm.
don't like Dream Theater. I don't think you like Dream Theater either.
Not really.
But I think we both will acknowledge that they have a place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They definitely have a place, and they won a
Oh,
Grammy. So obviously
absolutely.
someone likes them.
Absolutely.
Would
Respect them big time.
never make it today. Never would make it just because they're not 2-minute songs. They're artistic. You have to live with it for a while to get it.
Mhm.
All of the elements that make up Dream Theater would not fly in 2022.
Yeah, I know, I agree. Mhm.
They would be done, and they're just one example. There's Symphony X never would make it today.
Yeah,
Evergrey
mhm,
never would make it today.
mhm,
Any progressive band never would make it today.
mhm.
Honestly, I don't know what does make it today. Honestly, I mean,
Well, well, the thing too is what we're seeing. Like what I was talking to, and you talked to him too, Darren Miller from
yeah.
96 Bitter Beans,
Mhm,
XCKY, and it was towards the end of the interview, and we were talking something about the youth, and what's his goal was he just wants to see rock and metal become prevalent again. I think in
mhm.
society. And he was saying that he really thinks it's going to be. He feels like it's going to be real soon. He says because it's been about 20 years now, and everything goes in cycles, as we do all know. However, I don't know if I share that optimism
I
that
don't.
he does, but I will say this: we've been seeing. I don't want to really get into it because it's sort of blabbermouthy type of stuff, but we've been seeing some things recently in the media revolving some of these celebrities who are now all of a sudden they're saying, "Oh, they're fans of this band," and I'll just say Alice in Chains. Okay,
Okay.
so I know you're talking. I know you probably know what I'm talking about, but these are Hollywood people. Okay, that
Mhm.
normally wouldn't be talking about rock and metal ever, and now
Right,
they're saying they're fans of this band. So there could be some. We've been seeing now for years, Kardashians and all these people wearing these metal shirts
right, sure.
as style, even though they have no idea. I mean, even today, I'm in my classroom teaching, and there's this kid I know that's not into metal rock at all, and he's wearing an AC/DC shirt. How many people you see wearing AC/DC shirts these days? A
Yeah,
ton, because Target's selling the shirt for
right, of
one.
course.
So they're so the thing is like now people always say, well, it's great. That's great for metal. It's like with Metallica. I'm not trying to shit on Metallica. I love Metallica,
Mhm.
obviously, but there's instead the most commercial metal band of all time, and still the biggest rock probably band on the face of the earth today.
Sure.
We see Metallica all the time doing these benefits and shows with all these pop stars. With
Mhm.
Lady Gaga and The Weeknd and all these people, right? And there's Metallica. And the thing is, I know Lars always say, "Well, it's great for metal. We're ambassadors for metal, trying to get metal out there." Now,
No.
while I do agree, they helped it become more global in a lot of ways in countries that might have not had fans of metal before they maybe toured there or they became big. No, it's not good. It's not good for metal because
Mm-mm.
metal isn't about that, and that's the whole
Yeah.
point. You don't want metal to reach this super massive audience because then it dilutes it. I mean, it's going to automatically be watered down, and we saw that. No offense, I don't want to be attacking Metallica, but we saw how much their music changed over the years once they became part of the machine. There,
Dude, look at the entire '80s hair metal scene.
yeah. Oh,
The
absolutely,
entire
the whole
every
thing.
every
Yeah,
last band in
every
that
band.
scene every last band in that scene got less good musically because they got attention.
Yeah,
Every single one
I
of them.
know. Well,
And
attention
then
from the wrong
yeah, from the wrong
people.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, dude, there was a time, and I think you were probably a little young for it. Because I was a teenager when you mentioned your metal bands that you liked,
Mhm.
it was met with horror from the women.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And
yeah. You
and
scared
then
to admit
Motley
'em.
Crue then Motley Crue came along,
It
and
was
then
okay.
and then it was okay. Then it was the
Yeah.
same old situation, and Don't Go Away
Mhm.
Mad, just go, and then Skid Row, and all
Oh, yeah.
these other flavor bands that the girls liked.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying the women shouldn't like metal. I'm just saying that, you know, it kind of diluted it.
It did.
It
It
diluted
does.
it when it diluted it. Like for me, I can remember listening to Van Halen 1 in a parking lot at a McDonald's after a
Oh, really?
football game.
Okay. Mhm.
And it would be like all my friends and the girls and whatever that were there hanging out. And when, Eddie Van Halen would start really riffing hard, like Running the Devil or, Eruption or whatever,
Mhm.
the girls couldn't scatter fast enough. We were
Sure.
absolutely pariahs.
Mhm.
By the time 1984 would get on, though, they're right there singing Jump and,
Yeah, no, you're right. Uh-huh.
and
Mhm.
it was like, wait a minute, this is my band. You can't listen to this.
Exactly. And my thing is like it might have seen, might have been pretty cool at that time thinking, "Okay, now this is great.
Yeah.
These women and people who normally don't listen to this kind of music now are digging
Mhm.
this stuff." But let's be honest too, with Jump, I mean, that was probably the most diluted Van Halen song of all
Yeah,
time. Of
of
course, right?
course.
So that's the thing, is this whole thing of metal. It's like, I mean, when you think about metal being mainstream, that to me has never helped at all
No,
the genre or the scene at all. I mean, getting that to the masses doesn't mean it's help. It helps your pocket. It helps your success. Look, I'll never
mhm,
knock anybody is free to do what they want musically, what they want to do. I'll
sure,
never get on anyone for doing that. And Metallica doing what they did, but to still consider them, to me, like it's like that great line that Kerry King has about, Lars telling him, "Oh, you guys, you're just going to be stuck in the corner, for your whole careers." And he's like, "Good, I like my corner. I wouldn't want to
yeah,
be in any other corner." And
mhm,
and that's what it is. I think instead of everyone just being in their corners and sticking to, stop trying to, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to tell people what to do or bands what to do. It's just for metal though, as a whole, I think trying to commercialize it and get it out to as many ears and eyes as possible does not help it, as we've seen. I mean, like
yeah,
I said, now we're seeing Hollywood trying to get involved with metal again. I mean,
mhm,
we see what Hollywood does. We saw what they've done to the Coachella Festival. That was actually a cool little indie thing for a while that got
sure,
now just demolished. It became now just a pop festival.
right,
We saw it with Psycho in Vegas. You started having some of these other like indie rock bands getting over there. That's changed. It's still cool. Definitely a great festival, but it's not what it used to be,
right,
because once it gets some notoriety and Hollywood goes, "Oh, look at this thing over here, cool," just like they've done with scenes and music, and they've
mhm,
destroyed them over the years.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, it's really, I just look at my favorite bands, and it's not all of them, but I would say it's probably 70-30. My favorite bands are 70% bands that did not have huge success.
absolutely,
I'll
absolutely.
take a Biohazard over pretty much anybody not named Pantera or Metallica.
Yeah.
Honestly, I
Mhm.
mean, and even a band like Pantera, I think that's probably what is the most alluring thing about Pantera. They never really were commercially
No,
successful.
no, they never were. I mean,
They
that's
never
that's
sold out and
actually
they weren't, you
yeah.
know you
That's
know
actually a great point, a band like Pantera. They never did get that commercial success. They
yeah,
didn't take the road of Megadeth and Metallica, and they
no,
didn't do it.
no, they didn't
They
do their soft record.
never did. They got
Yeah.
heavier. They
Yeah.
got heavier and heavier.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine if Pantera would have put out their version of The Memory Remains or something? Oh
Oh
my
Lord.
god.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you. I think if they would have done that, it would have been pretty. I mean, if you listen to what they did with Rebel Meets Rebel with David Allan Coe, that is a great. Those
Yeah, it's
riffs on
fun.
that record, I love that record. It's a
Mhm.
fun, just good time record. That was their way of, I think, kind of getting a little bit softer, but it was still metallic. But they got more southern rock, so
Yeah.
I think they would have actually been pretty good if they would have went that way. But yeah, it wouldn't have been Pantera though. It would have been. It
Yeah.
just wouldn't have been
It
them.
would have
Like
diluted the Pantera brand.
absolutely.
The
Yeah.
same way that the Black Album diluted the Metallica brand.
Mhm.
Same
Yeah.
exact way.
Yeah, but you see, but even to me, like a Black Album, I'm okay with
Yeah,
because
I don't hate it. I mean,
yeah,
obviously I wrote a book about it. I don't hate it, but
mhm.
it definitely took them down a bad path.
Well, it led down a bad path, and
Yeah.
it's the path of fame. Let's be honest, that's
Mhm.
what it was. I mean, he sings about it. I mean, Hetfield's always sung about fame and how it's kind of fucked him up,
Yeah.
and because of that, yeah, I mean, I mean, like I said, Metallica's part of the big club now. They're not that Metallica from
Yeah.
from Orange County playing the local,
No.
shows down there, or
Yeah.
in the Troubadour in
No.
Hollywood. That
They're
just
not
it's
the
not.
guys stealing beer from the convenience store in the
Yeah,
Cliff 'Em All video.
no,
That band
they're
is
rubbing.
gone.
Yeah, they're gone, man. So
Yeah.
and that's the thing is that, and I don't like when everything just keeps coming back to Metallica. Metallica's not going to lead the revolution for new
No,
music.
not at all.
It's not. I mean, even look. I mean, now yeah, Nannies are back in. Like I said, Alice in Chains. I know since they're them and Pearl. See, Pearl Jam. As much as I'm not a fan of their music, they really did it right.
Mhm.
They did it right. They got out of the machine. They stopped making videos, no MTV, and they've
Yeah.
done it since. I mean, after that first record, they stopped,
Yeah.
and they're selling out arenas left and right. Still, you don't need it if you look at band like, even, I mean, on a lower level, a band like, if you want like a really great example of a band that did it right, is a band like Clutch. They did it all on
Oh,
their
yeah.
own too. I
Mhm.
mean, they played with whoever they played with. They went on these major labels, and like they always said, they used those major labels. They never succeeded on them, but they
Yeah.
were on like 3 of them, and they just used them mostly for the distribution purposes.
Mhm.
And then by the time they were dropped, they just opened up their own label, and they were already huge and had that huge fan base
Yeah.
that now, I mean, you go anywhere and they sell out everywhere. I mean, so
Mhm.
yeah, that's how you do it. You just you don't get, I don't, I don't say get greedy, but you just don't overexpose yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Metallica has done.
I agree.
Just using them as an example,
Mhm.
obviously.
Well, all of the big bands have done that.
Yeah, they all have. Yeah.
Pick the biggest. I mean, forget Metallica. Take them out of the equation. I'll go to
Yeah.
a different genre completely. Take a band like Nine Inch Nails.
Mhm.
That is a band that should have never had commercial success because their music was way too dirty, way
Mhm.
too violent, way too harsh. Then came the Downward Spiral, which had
Mhm.
hits. And once it had hits, then they wrote hits. Then they started writing the Bite the Hand That Feeds
Mm.
and,
Yep.
and the Perfect Drug and,
Yeah,
songs that were
sure.
made kind of for radio.
Yep.
Maybe
Mhm.
not fully for radio, but they definitely went more that direction.
Mhm. Yeah.
Korn's another one.
Oh,
Korn's
yeah.
first record, there was nothing on that was supposed to be a hit.
No.
That's a violent record,
Very
but
violent.
it
Yep.
had some hits. And what happened? It had some fame, and then you get
Life
It's
is
On
peachy.
and Life is Peachy. That's just garbage.
It's
That's
yeah,
just
it's
junk.
bad. Well, once again, that's what happened. I mean, like you said, they
But
got yeah.
think after that though, because that's when they started writing hits. That's when
Yeah.
you got the Life and
Well, because yeah, the
Falling
label's
Away from
telling you
Me
like,
and
"Hey, we
yeah,
need 1 or 2 hits. You gotta come up with these." And I mean,
yeah.
that's no secret that that's what labels
Mhm.
want you to do.
But why
And
do they
so
want it? For the exposure. They
well, of
want
course.
and the bands are all too look, as much as all of us sort of hate Nirvana, um, you got to give Nirvana credit. Nirvana had the biggest selling album of the 90s, or one of the biggest
Oh,
selling. It
yeah.
was
Well,
certainly the most influential.
I wouldn't say I don't hate,
But
Nirvana.
what did
Yeah.
they do? They came back with a record that the label turned down the first time
Yeah.
because it was so against the grain.
Yep.
And then they modified it just enough to
Mhm.
get the label to. And really, was there any real hits off of that thing? I mean,
Nah, maybe Rape Me or
Heart Shaped
something.
Yeah,
Yeah, How About Shape Box isn't a hit though, if you ask me. It's I mean,
and Rape Me.
yeah. I know, yeah.
In no
Well,
world
yeah.
should Rape Me be a hit. In no world should that be a hit,
Oh,
but it
that is
was.
true. It was.
I mean, they
Yeah.
say what you
Yeah.
want about Nirvana. They came back and were like, "Fuck you,
They
fame."
did. They did. I will give Kurt Cobain a lot of credit for he did. He didn't want that fame. He always said he never wanted that. Most of those
Yeah.
guys didn't. I mean, Lane Staley obviously didn't. He was a recluse, and
Mm-hmm.
those guys were never those kind of. They were just once again from that
Yeah.
small local scene that just that just
Yeah.
had something that no other scene has ever had, and that
Mhm.
Sub Pop, that was just something that people tried to emulate that they couldn't, because once again, like you said, I got to Cleveland with those labels. It was they opened just to get those bands, to get them on
Yeah.
those P&D deals, where Sub Pop was all about just sign in and find them local talent, and just knocking it out. And they did it with so many bands, and they're still doing it.
Yeah.
That's another label that didn't sell out, and they really didn't. So they just,
Yeah.
I mean, they took what they could, and now it's obviously been able to allow them to have this label for the rest of their lives, which
Right.
is great. And so that's, once again, that comes from a very, it's a lot of integrity, musical integrity, artistic integrity, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
where you don't want to overexpose yourself. You want to keep that. You want to, you want people talking about you, and that all your records are great. I mean, let's be honest. I keep using Metallica. I just use them because they're the biggest band.
Sure.
But is anyone really looking forward to a new Metallica record, even if it came out? I mean, we've tried for a couple of them. They've
Yeah.
had some good moments, but they've never even come close. And I know a lot of bands, as they get older, that they obviously, that happens. That's very common.
Well, dude,
But
I mean, I still get pumped up for, but again, I'm old. I still get pumped up for a Metallica record, a Megadeth record, an Anthrax record. My big bands, Judas Priest. The bands that I
mm,
grew up loving.
mm,
And that being said, like even the Megadeth record, love Megadeth. Been a Megadeth fan since Megadeth's been a band, really. And that record came out, the most current one, the So Good, So Dead, whatever it's called. And that right there should tell you, I don't even know what the name of the fucking record is. But I listened to it like 2 or 3 times. I was like, Okay. You know,
Yeah, no,
it's not peace sells. It's
no,
not even dystopia.
no, no.
You
And
know?
I think, but if that new Exodus record came out, you'd be pretty damn pumped, and it would sound pretty damn good, and that's the difference too. I
Mhm.
think a lot of these bands, by keeping their core sound over the years, they've been able to continue
Sure.
to just make that sound better and better instead of trying to cross genres and cross these boundaries, which don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, I think it's totally fine to do and you wanna experiment with. But when that becomes your sole thing, and then I just, a lot of those bands just well, you end up losing your way as a band because now you're a business. You're no
Yeah.
longer just this hungry band that wants to continue to kick people's asses when they go play shows. There's so much other things that are involved, elements involved when it comes to your songwriting and just how you promote music. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
yeah,
there is. There is.
yeah,
And but you're 1,000% right though. Those bands that didn't change their sound or didn't change drastically that stayed the course,
mhm,
I would argue that they're all more popular than they were
yeah.
in the day.
Oh yeah,
Death
absolutely.
Angel's way more popular now than they
All those
ever
bands, yeah.
in
It's
the
just
day.
Testament, the same
Yeah,
thing.
Testament too. Yeah,
Hmm.
but I specifically point to Death Angel because I lived out there at the time that the Act
Hmm.
3 was out,
Sure.
and I saw them play on the Act 3 tour, and I saw them play as The Organization, which was basically
Yeah.
the
Mm.
band without Mark,
Without Mark, yeah.
and, and they did not pack them in, and
Mhm.
that was when they were a legitimate big band. They were signed to a major, they were a legitimate big band with big money behind them. And now you go see them, and they're packing them in.
Sure, yeah.
Same with
Mhm.
Exodus, same with
Yep.
Testament, same with the, Vicious Rumors.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
all those bands that kinda stayed the course and didn't sell out
Mhm.
are bigger now than they were in the day,
They are,
almost
they'll
universally.
all yeah, they'll all tell you that. I mean, they'll
Mhm.
all tell you that they can't
Yeah.
believe how much even some of these the bands that weren't as huge, like that band Blind Illusion I interviewed
Mhm.
recently, that they're bigger now than ever. I
Sure.
mean, they were only known before as Les Claypool's original band,
Right.
that was it. Now you've got
Mhm.
people that are finding out about them because I also think you've got some of these younger fans who are into it that are looking into these older bands, and
Yeah.
now that you can go on Spotify and just click it up, see, we couldn't do that back in the day.
Right.
Think about it, I would have definitely been into so many more bands from the
Oh, yeah.
'70s and '80s if we were able to go on Spotify. If we
Mhm.
had that option, we just didn't. We had to rely on our friends' records, our
Yeah.
parents' records, or just our own records, and that was it.
Dude, Spotify back in the day was ripping off Columbia House.
Yeah, exactly. That's
That was
exactly.
Spotify for me. 12
I
for a
know.
penny, 12 for a penny, and I'm good.
Oh, yeah. I think I still have those collection notices coming. You know what I mean? Oh, those things, man. I mean, yeah, that is funny. That's exactly what it was, though. You're right. I mean, but that's how desperate we were to get new music
Yeah.
that because we couldn't afford to buy 12
Mhm.
tapes. So
Right.
yeah, you get even if they were a couple years old, so be it,
Yeah.
or it wasn't a
Well,
great record.
and I don't know about you, but I know for me, like when it was 12 for a penny or 15 for a penny or whatever it would be,
Mhm.
I could usually find 8 that I wanted. So
Yeah.
then I would start picking things that I didn't know but looked cool.
Mhm, okay.
I literally would be looking at the little remember it used to have the little pamphlet?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The little
Oh, of
pamphlet.
course. Oh, yeah.
I'd be looking through the pamphlet. I'd be like, "Well, that
Sure.
looks pretty cool. I'll take
I
that."
take that. I know.
And I mean, some of them hit and some of them didn't,
Oh
but
god, I know. I have some real winners, man. I think one of my biggest winners on that was it Gene Loves Jezebel. I had one of their tapes, World Party. I don't know if you remember those
I
guys at
remember
all.
World Party.
Yeah, I
Oh, yeah.
remember them. They had a couple of decent songs. They were okay. But yeah, I mean, I had some interest in. I mean, it's funny to go through that stuff, and I know. But you're right. I mean, yeah, but once again, that was just and even though most of those tapes probably found 2 songs on each tape that were good,
Mhm.
it was at least something that was
Yeah,
new.
you were learning something new,
New.
something different, and,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I don't know, for me, a lot of times I'd be in my car when I was 16 years old or whatever, and I'd be driving and, picking up this girl or that girl, whatever, to go out on a date or whatever, and I'd pop in that stuff because they wouldn't
Mhm.
know it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was
Mhm.
something to talk about. It was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what are we listening to here? Oh, this is just
Yeah.
World Party, of course, don't you know?" You
A
know?
huge band, come on.
Yeah. They're the next big thing.
Yeah, next Rolling Stones.
They're the next Starship.
Yeah. Ah, cool, man. Well, I guess we can get ready to wrap it up. Just one quick thing though before we do
Yeah.
go in terms of this topic. I think another thing, as we're just talking about Columbia House and these records, is also the death of the physical music products. I think has contributed to the downfall of local scenes as
Oh
well,
yeah.
because of record stores. I mean, that was a big thing. Obviously, signings were crucial to local scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go to the store. There were shows at a lot of those, stores and the
Sure.
signings. Just overall, the physical ownership and just physical presence of music is just pretty much gone. And that's
It's
just one
sad.
last thing I wanted to say. It's really
Yeah.
sad, man. It
Well,
is. Yeah.
dude, in my interviews, in every interview that I do on Chris Aiken Presents, I say this record is out on blah 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 date.
Mm,
Go buy it.
yeah.
Don't stream it. Buy
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Every single artist, every single one of them lights up when I say that.
Yeah.
That I actually say buy it, and 99% of them at the end of the interview they thank me for saying on the interview to buy the
To buy
physical
it.
product,
Mm-hmm.
because it's still important to them, and that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, I'm not a physical product guy. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have any physical product. I have no use for it. I don't have a CD player. I don't know what I would do with physical product, honestly. But that being said, I certainly, from talking to bands, I understand that they still put in the work like they did in the old days. That the art is still important to them. The
Yeah.
graphics are still important to them. It all means something to them. Look at this thing right here. This is something. I'll hold it up to the camera here. You see this thing?
Yes.
This is it's a horrible art, but it's
It's
from a
pretty
band.
bad.
It's
Sorry.
awful. It's from a band called A to Z. It's the drummer
Oh,
from
from Fate's Warning.
Fate's Warning, yeah.
Yes.
And I get the symbolism of it. An apple, a zebra, A to Z.
Yeah.
I get it. That's fine. It's not a great cover.
All right, no comment, but yeah.
I'll say it, it's not a great cover.
It's terrible.
But
Yeah.
For him, in what he was trying to represent, this
Mhm.
was an important thing. Important enough that because I did a good interview with him, he sent me this metallic sign that he had made.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
And signed it on the back.
Very cool.
Because for him, the physical product is important. And I think a lot of these bands, the physical product is important to them. And they feel like you're not enjoying the full experience.
Yes.
Unless you get the physical thing where you can hold it in your hand and you can, see the liner notes. And
it is true, man. I mean, well, once again, like you said, great point. These guys, I mean, look, the only reason why they're still doing it today is because for the love of it. I mean, it's it. I mean, there's no monetary value in this stuff. I mean, there's not. They're just they want to. I mean, they'd probably. It's like that guy Mark Biederman was saying for Blind Illusion. He's like, for me, I wouldn't even sell these things. He's like, I would just trade them with people for a joint.
Sure.
Hey, you give me a joint. Yeah, here's my record.
Nice.
Because it's about they want you to hear it. Obviously, if they could charge 99 cents for a vinyl, they would do it. But why?
Sure.
But they'd be out a shit ton of money. That's why they can't do it.
Mhm.
But yeah, these musicians are in it just for the love of it. I mean, it's one of those things that we hear all the time. It's these people say, "This is I have to do this." This is what gets me up in the morning. Is this? And so that's why. And like you said, a great point with that record. Is that you don't a lot of times if you're not looking at all the liner notes or looking at the artwork and you're not playing it on a vinyl or something, just just like you said, the listening experience that used to take place.
Yeah,
I think it does dilute the listening experience. Obviously, I mean, I've got physical product. I wish I'd have more. I won't gonna lie. I used to collect a lot. I've kind of slowed down a little bit now. A lot of it's too because look, it's expensive. And even vinyl's gotten so expensive. If I could just go to places that use vinyl and pay $5 a vinyl, I'd buy a whole shitload of them.
right.
But you got to sit there, you got to look through these things. It takes hours, so it takes time.
Yeah,
and so that's the thing too. It's just time consuming. People always want to save time, and that's another reason why we've got physical products that have gone to the wayside too, because it's just so easier. and convenient to just pop it on your stream. So,
and to pull it all the way back around, it's also why we have the global community instead of the in the club community, because people don't want to give up the time.
Yep, exactly. You know, and yeah, so. And with that being said, I think we've had a good discussion on this topic.
I'd say.
Yeah, I would say as well. Well, once again, Chris, great time. Anything you want to say or add before we wrap it up?
No, just visit all the shows on the CMS Podcast Network, cmspn.com. All the shows are really kicking ass right now. So if you haven't been following along, get all the shows, because tons of great interviews, tons of great music, and tons of great music that most of you don't know. So go and find a lot of it, because it's well worth your time.
Absolutely. I agree. And with that, we will see everybody next time on Tremors. Thanks for watching and listening. See you next time.